Hi, Deirdre here from Wexford Arts Centre's InSight Education Portal team. Today we're going to be doing print mark making with everyday objects that you can find in your home. We're conscious that these days people are not necessarily going to have all the art supplies you would normally use for print mark making in the family home. So what we're doing is we're using a lot of art materials and things that you would possibly have. Things like poster paints rather than using printing inks. The different paper surfaces we're using things like printing paper. You'd have a printer at home, or card, white card, and any kind of recycled materials that you have available. What I'm going to be looking at today is producing some simple work with foliage. These are cards that I'm just starting to work on. They're using more solid type of foliage that can be used as mark making tools. So I'm using leaves like these. I'm also looking at where you might want to actually include a coloured background. And if you want to use the more delicate types of foliage, the more spring-like, say leaves coming from or daffodil bulbs and things like that, they actually work out very effectively for this type of printmaking, where you're actually using the plant to block out part of the colour that's actually picked up. And it can also be very, very effective doing it in layers to produce abstract type work. Doing some foraging for foliage to use in the print mark making. Here I'm just going to take just one or two leaves from my daffodils that are just starting to come up. I really don't want to damage them. There's also some nice shaped dandelion leaves. They have a lovely shape, kind of profile for marking out. So we'll take a couple of those. There's also some wild orchid. I just absolutely love the shape of the leaves. And what I find with them is if you turn it over and look at the back, they have a really, really beautiful sort of heart and vein type thing going on, which is lovely in print mark making. And now some lovely bamboo leaves. And again, when you tear one off, it's the back that actually has the most textured surface. This is a reference book I was given as a present about a year ago, and I found it really, really helpful when I'm foraging for different shaped leaves and branches and things to use as print mark making tools. Its title is Britain's Wildlife Plants and Flowers, a Reader's Digest Complete Spotter's Guide. Now, it's quite an old publication from the 1980s, and it actually covers Britain and Ireland. I think historically, geographically, it would have been called the British Isles at that time. So just to show you a little bit inside the book. Again, it's just showing you there Britain's Wildlife Plants and Flowers, and that it's published by the Reader's Digest Association. The index, to show you how it's broken down, it starts with wildflowers, trees and shrubs. They're the two that I would use most, particularly the wildflowers. But it also looks at non-flowering plants and then gets into fauna, birds, butterflies, moths and things, mammals, reptiles and water life. It's an absolutely beautifully compiled book. The level of detail that it goes into is quite amazing. This is the overview of the wildflowers section. So it just gives you an introduction into them. And then it breaks them down into really detailed subgroups. This group here is white or pale pink flowers, and it's talking about this category being up to 4 petals and having regular flowers. So it literally breaks down each one like that. To show you an example of something that we would probably all be fairly familiar with. Earlier I was showing you, I was foraging some dandelion leaves. So here are the leaves that I collected. It's very easy to be able to compare them with the drawings. The drawings are absolutely, they're beautifully illustrated. And it also gives you a lot of information around where the dandelions grow. It gives a description of the type of structure that it has. It's just really interesting. And I find it helps me a lot when I'm trying to decide what way to use the shapes and the profiles and textures that are involved in the various plants. So I'm going to move on now, and we're going to start having a look at the other everyday tools that we will be using, and also start getting into mixing some paints. So as I mentioned earlier, instead of using the standard print mark making equipment, I'm going to show you some alternatives that you could hopefully have readily available in your home. For my regular print making, mark making, I would use these rollers. They're available from most online art supply shops. Spectrum in Wexford Town have them available. That's a 2-inch, this is a 4-inch, and this is a 6-inch. The rollers in my practice have 2 primary uses. The first is for actually rolling out ink and transferring the ink from your palette where you've mixed it and rolled it out onto your plate, which is what you would be actually taking your print from. Normally I would use a 4-inch for this job. If I'm working on a very small area, say trying to add a little bit of additional colour to something, I would often use a 2-inch. The role of the larger roller is normally to actually, if I'm doing hand rolled prints rather than using my etching press, either because I don't have space to use it, or I find working with children a lot that it's much quicker to actually be able to hand roll and get a number of people to do it, so the children aren't waiting too long to get their prints rolled. So that's why I would normally use a wider 6-inch roller for that. The alternatives that we've looked at, a few of the participants in the classes, one is this is a radiator paint roller. It's quite small and it comes with a pack of normally about 10 of these. If you're using alternatives to inks like paint, this would actually be a particularly good option because these are washable, and I'd say you could wash and dry pretty quickly, but that's a very handy one. Small little rolling pins. These are cheap rolling pins. I got this one in deals in town. I think it was about $1.50 or something like that. Now it will obviously get stained by using the inks or paints, or you could try and cover it with cling film, but I still think even with that, so I'd say it's not something you're going to be going in between art making and baking in the kitchen. But that one I would use as the equivalent of the 4-inch, i.e. I'd be using that to actually roll out ink, and this one. The larger rolling pin I would use as the equivalent of my 6-inch printing roller, in that I would only use it for dry work. As well, this one is cardboard rings attached to a cardboard roll, hard roll, or wine bottles were suggested, preferably full. And this little beauty was bought in Mr. Price. Today I'm using water-based tempera poster paints instead of the etching inks that I would normally use. I have a selection of different kind of mixing plates and plates and palettes. I'm using plastic containers, cardboard covered, with a freezer bag. And in the top right hand corner there is an actual acetate or piece of acetate that I would normally use for print mark making. You can get them in art supply shops. They come in a large sheet you cut up. For my first mix I'm making an orange with red and yellow. That's the orange that I mixed and the radiator roller. I place the inked roller gently over the back of the leaf, gently transferring the orange paint onto the back of the leaf. I then place the leaf ink face down on top of the card, get my rolling pin and a clean sheet of paper to protect it. Then I use the rolling pin to roll both horizontally and vertically. And then when I lift the protective paper, this is the print. And I'm going to print on the same leaf again, this time using purple. I've done the same process, mixed it, rolled it out, placed it gently on the leaf, put the leaf ink face down, put paper over it and rolled. And this is what we end up with, overlap. Really pretty. This time I'm inking up one of my acetate plates to put a background colour before I place the inked leaf, ink face upwards this time. And this is what happens when I roll a print off it. So I have my background inked plate showing, and then the ink face up leaf printed as well. This time I mixed up some various shades of green on a large glass chopping board, which I'm using as a palette. I rolled the roller, just getting little bits of each colour on board. I'm using the delicate foliage placed on paper. I roll around, across it, up and down, remove the leaves, and this is a lovely effect you can get. So for this one, what we're going to do is do some abstract work. I'm doing it on a piece of cardboard cut out to fit perfectly inside a freezer bag. And it's quite a handy size to use for printing on our cards. So what I'm going to do is I have some mixed greens left over from the last piece that we did. And what I'm doing is I'm just doing really random bits of yellow and blue and green, just to get nice kind of patternedy things going on here. I don't want it too perfect. Sometimes you just kind of have to trust and let things evolve. But if you know yourself that you want some bright bits in it, don't be afraid to put a little bit of pure yellow somewhere along the line. So I'm just going to put my roller aside for a while. Although I'm not trying to do a deliberate pattern or anything in it, what I do like to do is to let the shape of plants come into it in some kind of little way. So what I'm doing is I'm taking a little bit of the more delicate foliage that I took before, and I'm just pressing it in. I'm not looking to do any particular set pattern or anything. It's not going to do a huge amount that you can visibly see. I'm not going to leave it on while I do the print, because if I do, I'll just get a very big white space. The poster paint doesn't pick up very well if you put any kind of a barrier down. Now, this is just my first layer. So I'll just do a tiny bit more patterning. So I'm pressing this textured surface down, and it's actually lifting away some of the paint. So let's see what we have. And as I keep saying, these are experiments. You're not going to know what you get until you actually try and roll it. Don't invest too heavily and expecting every single one to turn out great. Just play with it, and I promise you, you will be rewarded. So what I'm going to do, I want to be careful with the card, and I don't want it to get messed up on the back. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to turn that around. And I'm going to try and get, that's going to be the front. So I'm just going to try and line it up there. Now, I do have extra pieces up here, but that's fine. That's just because my plate is slightly larger than the surface of the card. But what I will do is I will put a sheet around it to protect the roller. And in this instance, again, because I do want to get a fair bit of pressure and I find it hard to use my two hands, I'm going to go back and use my ink roller. So I'm holding it to try and keep it in position. And what I would normally do is roll both vertically and horizontally. Now, let's see what's come up as our first layer. So this is what we have on our first layer. And I think it's actually quite interesting. It's quite nice. You can see the effect of placing the plants on the paint and removing it. So it's actually quite nice. But what I would like to do is get a little bit more colour into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just do another little bit of paint, not a huge amount. And maybe just think a little bit about where the addition of a little bit of colour might be nice. Again, don't over plan it, don't over structure it. It would be nice, I think, to get a little bit more blues into it. And I'm just going to try it at that. Again, I'm just going to fold the card back to try and make sure not to get anything on the edge. In the place where I want to get a little bit more colour. I just place it down. And because I'm not going to press it too hard, but I will protect it again. There's a sheet. Again, just roll a little bit, and it's mainly up the top end that I think a little bit more colour would be beneficial, and not so much the bottom end. And there we go. So I hope you enjoyed our session today, doing print and mark making with everyday objects. Today was primarily with using foliage, but in other weeks we'll be using a range of everyday objects around the house, and anything basically used as a mark making tool, anything with a textured surface. I use a lot of kitchen equipment, things like curtains, bits of lace, scraps, any kind of things that have a surface texture. We will be in touch in relation to when those videos will be out. Also, we'd be really interested in seeing any samples of work that you do as a result of having a look at this video, and be it with poster paints or inks. If you would like to share those with us, if you could email them, please, to Wexford Art Centre. The address is boxoffice@wexfordartcentre.ie. And obviously we'll only put them up with your permission if you wish us to do so. We'd like to put them on the InSight portal as well, if that's okay. Thank you for your time today. I will be doing some more free Zoom sessions over the next number of weeks, really gathering ideas from people who are experimenting doing this print mark making at home. If you would be interested in joining me for any of those, please contact me directly. I'll put a copy of my business card at the end of the video. And it's just, we do maybe 40 minutes or an hour, normally in the afternoon, different days of the week. And we keep in contact with each other through a WhatsApp group. So please let me know if you're interested in that. I'd also like to say goodbye. Zoe, come here. From Zoe the dog, who likes to join in on these sessions and make a lot of noise. So apologies if there were whining noises in the background. She gets a bit distracted when I'm using Zoom. So thank you very much for joining me, and hope to see you again soon. Keep safe.